Oh, what a mess. This is Neil Schneider from Meant to Be Seen. Welcome back to my messy basement. It has been a disgracefully long time since I've last done one of these episodes, but I think it will be worth the wait. Okay, so I've got special plans this hour. First, just a quick announcement. Well, I work with an organization called the International Future Computing Association, or TIFCA for short, and our annual conference is coming up this coming November 8th to 9th at the Ontario Science Centre in Toronto, Canada. This is the 5th edition of Immersed, and it's all about future computing. If you're not familiar with future computing is the practice of turning dreams into reality. Okay? And it's based on the 3 pillars of compute performance and platforms, immersive technology, and of course, innovative content and applications. So in short, it's really about building what's next and getting the right people together to build what's next. And it's really exciting stuff. This is the 5th edition of Immersed, so we're really excited about it. Just some of the top speakers this year. Frank Soki, he's the Vice President of the Gaming Division at Intel. Daryl Sartain, he's Director of Virtual Reality for Advanced Micro Devices. Derek Orr, he's Division Chief at NIST, or the National Institute of Standards and Technology. These are the atomic clock people. And of course, we've got a slew of other speakers and many more to be announced. So we're really excited about Immersed. You can learn more about it at getimmersed.com. Really exciting stuff. Now, what do I have planned for you this hour for Neil's Messy Basement? Well, this is a first-time product review for me. This is the Creative Labs Sound Blaster AE5 sound card. And what does it do? Well, you guessed it. It's there to make your personal computer, your PC, sound better. Okay? But so what I had to do to make this review possible is that, you don't just get a box like this and review it. I had to actually get an understanding of all the lingo and audio, and I needed a baseline, so I had to see what regular PC audio sounds like, so I had to test a few different computers to see what they sounded like. And beyond the sound card itself, it was a really a big learning experience for me. So, by the time you're done with this show, not only will you have an understanding of this product, you're also going to have a better understanding of audio in itself. And you'll be able to judge, hopefully for yourself, what the audio that you're getting out of your PC today and what you could be getting out of a Creative Labs sound card, in this case, the AE5. And we'll see if it's worth your while. The other thing, too, is we have the mindset here that, of course, we're all about immersive technology. So we're going to be judging this sound card from the point of view of a virtual reality gamer versus a traditional gamer. So the needs are somewhat different, and we're going to go into all of that. So we have a lot to cover this hour, and, enjoy. We'll be back with more right after this. Welcome back to my messy basement. I'm really excited about doing this review of the Creative Labs Sound Blaster AE5 sound card. Really exciting stuff. So we have a lot to cover today. So just a heads up, I did this review from the perspective of a virtual reality gamer. Okay, the needs of a VR gamer are a little bit different than a traditional gamer. So there's a handful of features I didn't really cover with this sound card, only because it's not relevant for a VR gamer. I'm really 100% focused on the audio of this card. Now, just a heads up as to what we tested on, or what I tested on. I tested on an HTC Vive, tested on, of course, an Oculus Rift, and this is the Acer Windows Mixed Reality headset. So I got a good sampling of the different PC virtual reality systems. So before I go into the actual product review, one of the things about audio and sound cards is you get bombarded with all kinds of marketing information as to what the card is capable of. And I think it's very helpful to understand what this lingo means. I mean, there's all kinds of terms that you're going to hear with audio, and I think it's very important to understand them. So I did a lot of research in preparation for this review, and I'm going to share with you what I learned. I still have more to learn, but anyway, so hopefully this will be helpful for you. So these are some important terms you're going to continually hear about. So first up is analog. Okay, so when we're talking about analog audio, we're really talking about signal strength and vibrations. Okay, so this is the basic form of audio signal, it's most relevant to actually a lot of media which we don't really use anymore. Cassette tapes, record players, musical instruments, of course, are still relevant, and so on. But these are all forms of audio that are dependent on signal strength and vibrations. But something that is still extremely relevant when it comes to analog are our headphones and speakers. It doesn't matter what these things are connected to, these are 100% analog devices. So, but after analog, we have what we call digital. And digital is literally ones and zeros. I mean, yes, you could have compression, which is making a bigger file smaller, but really, for our point of view, it's really all about ones and zeros. So if we're talking about digital files, we should be thinking of like WAV files and MP3 files, CDs, DVDs, Blu-rays, content that you get through the internet. That's 100% digital content. The other thing that's very important when it comes to digital audio is our connectors. So if you look behind your PC, usually you'll have an HDMI connector or a DisplayPort connector or a dual link DVI connector. It's not just video that these connectors send, it's also audio as well. 100% digital, ones and zeros. But something to remember is no matter what whatever content we're listening to, whether it's sourced from a computer or a stereo or a surround sound system, whatever it is, even if it's all based on the best digital equipment out there, at the end of the day, we're dependent on analog. Analog is always in the audio map, if you will. That's where it ends. So this is why you're going to hear a lot about a digital analog converter, or a DAC. And what the DAC does is it takes those ones and zeros, that digital information, and converts it into a signal and vibrations that your speakers or your headphones will ultimately understand. And it could be argued that this is the riskiest part of the process, because unless those ones and zeros are properly converted, you're not going to have a very fulfilling audio experience. So this is very, very important. Now, that's analog, okay? Now we're going to start hearing about a bunch of terms in the digital world, and this is all, of course, very important. So first up is bit rate and bit depth. This is about how much information is handled at a time, okay? So it's actually very similar to the CPU world, where we'll hear way back when you had the 8-bit CPU and the 16-bit and the 32-bit, 64-bit. Well, we have something very similar in the analog world, where you've got 8-bit audio, 16-bit audio, and I think it peaks at 32-bit audio. I haven't heard anything beyond that, but it's a similar idea. And the bit depth is important because it impacts the resolution and details of the audio, and it also makes it possible for finer adjustments when recording your content. So there is importance for the bit depth. Sample rate. Okay, so this has to do with the frequency we hear from the content. So our ears, the human ear, is capable of anywhere from 20 hertz up to about 20 kilohertz. We lose some of that capability as we get older, and if you're an animal like a dog, you actually have significantly more hearing capacity. But for our point of view, we're really worried about that 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz range, maybe a little bit more. And this is why when you get a CD or a DVD or audio content, you'll regularly see that it's encoded with a sample rate of 44 kilohertz or 48 kilohertz, sometimes 96 kilohertz, but really 44, 48, those are the popular ones, because they want to make sure that the content is delivering the frequency that your ears are capable of hearing. Dynamic range, okay, also known as DNR. This is measured in decibels. This is the ratio of the loudest to softest sound, okay? It's also referred to as the maximum output, or the maximum signal output, relative to the noise floor. I think the way to think about it, it's not the same as frequency. It has to do more as recognizing the differences of volume. The human ear can hear about 120 decibels, okay, of dynamic range. To put this in perspective, according to Creative Labs, most computer motherboards are marketed as having 90 decibels of range. Their product is marketing itself as supporting 122 decibels of dynamic range. So we'll go into that a little bit later, but that's what dynamic range is about. Virtual surround sound, also known as virtual 7.1 sound. Now this is more of a marketing term, but I'll explain what this is about. So normally when you have surround sound in your home, you have physical 5.1 surround sound system. So what this means is you have 5 speakers, and plus a 0.1 is your subwoofer. So that's responsible for the bass sound. And it's literally the speakers are surrounding, and you could hear things from different directions. If you have a higher end system, you may have a 7.1 surround sound system where you literally have 7 physical speakers. Well, the way virtual surround sound or virtual 7.1 sound works is, well, we have to remember we only have 2 ears. So what they do is they simulate the physics of sound through the 2 speakers in your headphones to get a very similar, if not the same result as you would through a physical speaker. So really it's kind of mimicking the behavior of the physical speakers in your 2 ear cups to get a very similar result. Very innovative stuff, and I think it's exciting technology. Amplification, okay, this has to do more with the headphones. What happens is if you have a high-end headphones, you may need a stronger signal for them to effectively work or to get the best audio quality possible. So that's what the amplification is for. Let me share with you some history of the sound card, because it's quite something. So about 10 years ago, if you were a gamer like myself, you would know that PC audio really, really sucked. And this is why. So back in the day, most of the audio was processed on your CPU. And the result, even though you could plug your surround sound speakers into your motherboard, and there were at least I think 5 or 6 jacks for the surround sound speakers, the audio was muddled. Okay, it's almost like you couldn't differentiate where the sounds were coming from exactly. They weren't quite sharp, and it worked. Okay, it was better than what was previously available on PC, but it wasn't the full audio experience. And the only way to really achieve that full audio experience was to get a sound card. And the Creative Labs Sound Blaster card was the go-to card. And they had a whole series of cards. I think among their most popular was the Creative Labs XFI series of cards, which I had. And it just made a huge difference. But it wasn't just about the hardware itself. They actually had an API for programmers, for content creators, called EAX. And the idea was that using their software tools and the custom abilities of their sound card, they were able to add all kinds of realistic effects to audio that otherwise wasn't there. Things like reverberation effects, or the audio would sound different according to the types of environment you were in. So really, really exciting stuff, and it made a huge difference. There was a big difference between the content creators that supported the EAX platform and those that didn't. Okay, so what ultimately changed? Well, first up was Windows. When Windows Vista arrived, they effectively stopped supporting hardware acceleration for audio. So this created a problem, and what Creative Labs did was they developed an alternative software path that their EAX platform could work, but it was a handicap. It definitely was a handicap. The other thing is that the content creators, they didn't want to support like custom sound cards. They just wanted to code ones and it should work well for everyone. So even though EAX is still supported on paper, very few content creators supported it directly. I did my research, and you could find legacy games, you could find older games that are still supported, but as far as modern titles, I have not really seen any that support EAX. If you hear of one, let me know. Motherboards, okay, so which is primarily where the audio has been coming from for PC gamers to date. They got better. I mean, they included much better audio capacitors on the motherboard, better audio insulation. The other thing is, remember that the processing had been done on the CPU before. Well, the CPUs have become magnitudes better than anything we had 10 years ago. And this is what's ultimately driving the audio codecs, or the audio software that makes it all work. The other thing, too, is that there's no longer, as I discussed earlier, there's no longer really any proprietary support. The content creators say, you know what, this is the audio, do with it what you will, and the motherboards just take that content and they push out their audio. So there isn't really huge differences as in how the audio is handled from one solution to the next. The other change is that I mentioned earlier that the CPU is primarily responsible for processing the audio, but we're starting to see evidence of changes in this. So what's happening, for example, is through HDMI and DisplayPort and dual-link DVI, the content processing is being pushed away from the computer. So if you recall, when I talked about where is the digital analog converter, you're having the ones and zeros produced from the computer, but it's the head-mounted display that is converting the digital signal to the headphones and speakers, the analog signal. So that's a change. And we're also seeing, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, the graphics cards are starting to process audio as well. And again, I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. So let's play a little bit of a game, actually. So called "Where is the Digital Analog Converter?" So I kind of gave it away just now, but I'll talk about it again. What the heck? So surround sound speakers. Imagine you're in a scenario where you've got your 5.1 surround sound, you've got your computer. Where's the digital analog converter? Well, your computer is connected through HDMI to your stereo system. So your stereo system takes those ones and zeros and converts it into a signal that the 5.1 speakers will understand. So the signal plus the vibrations, and then that's what gives them the result. Same if you have headphones connected. It's the sound system that ultimately does the heavy lifting. Next up, surround sound speakers. Okay, but what I mean by this is the surround sound speakers connected directly to the motherboard, directly to the PC. So you should have, I think, 5 or 6 jacks in your motherboard, and you hook up the speakers, and way to go, you got your 5.1 surround sound. Well, what happens in this case is the ones and zeros are processed through the content. It's sent through your motherboard. The motherboard has the digital analog converter, which ultimately converts the signals to something that your headphones will understand. And spoiler alert, what happens with a virtual reality head-mounted display? Well, what happens in this case is the ones and zeros are processed on the computer. They're sent through the HDMI connector through your headset. On your headset, you have a 3.5 millimeter plug to plug in your headphones. So the DAC, or the digital analog converter, is right here. And the same goes for the HTC Vive. Again, signals coming through the HDMI connector, going to the Vive. In the case of the Oculus Rift, the Rift has 2 choices. One choice is you use the headphones built into the head-mounted display. So in that case, you're using the DAC built into the Oculus Rift headset itself. Or if you're not using their headphones, you're connecting directly to the motherboard, and in that case, you're using the DAC built onto the computer motherboard. So why is virtual reality audio unique compared to traditional PC gaming. Well, out of the box, as you can see, all the audio is processed through the HDMI or DisplayPort connection system. So it's not processed elsewhere. The other thing is that unlike a traditional PC gamer where you're using a 5.1 surround system around you, you're actually limited to using headphones. Okay, it's very unlikely that you're going to be using your surround sound speakers for your VR. You're more likely going to be using headphones, along with your head-mounted display. So this makes it very unique as well. The other thing is there's a handful of features on the sound card that you're just not going to use in virtual reality because you can't see them. I mean, you're in VR. There's no way you could if you wanted to. So this is the process I went through when it came to testing the Sound Blaster AE5. So the first step for me was I had to go to the doctor's office to check that my ears were okay. I needed to make sure that I could hear fine and everything was okay. And this is what happened.
God's sakes.
Well, the good news is my ears are okay. I'm just, obviously I should be doing that a little more often, and I might need to change my doctor as well. But that's beside the point. My ears are fine. So this is the process I went through. So first, I had to run identical audio experiences on 3 different machines. It wasn't enough to just check on the Sound Blaster card. It was important that I checked the motherboard audio as well. I needed a baseline. And more than this, I also need to be using the same set of headphones on each machine. So these are Skull Candy Grind headphones. I've had them for a while. I've been very happy with them. I'd say they're a good mid-range set of headphones. They're not super expensive, but I think they're significantly better than anything you'd get with your head-mounted display or VR head-mounted display. The other thing is when listening to the audio, I was comparing both the audio coming directly out of the motherboard, okay, so directly plugged into the computer, and the audio being processed through the HDMI connector through the head-mounted display. As far as content choices, I focused on video games and music. And I used the computer motherboard as the baseline. Actually, I had more than one motherboard to work with. Okay, so as far as the computers I used, 2 were desktop PCs, and they were identical except for the graphics card. So the motherboard was a Gigabyte Z170 SLI, SLI XP, I believe. It's a good mid-range motherboard. They promote themselves as having 115 decibels of dynamic range, and in my opinion, it's all in all a good motherboard. The only difference between the 2 desktop machines was the graphics card. So one machine was an NVIDIA GTX 1070, and the second machine was based on an AMD R9 390X. So that was really the distinct difference. The third machine was based on an NVIDIA GTX 1070, but it's a laptop computer. This is an Asus G752VS laptop machine. You can't run a sound card on a laptop, but I wanted to see if the choice of motherboard made a difference in the audio. So what did I listen to? Okay, so let's take a look, see here. So we got here. Okay, so U2, these are all audio CDs. So U2, Toto. Believe it or not, Toto's on the recommended list. If you're testing audio, I actually was looking online what they recommend testing, and Toto was one of the bands they recommended testing with. Eagles, Tom Petty, God rest his soul, The Police, of course, and this is New Kids on the Block, Hanging Tough. I don't think there's any reason why I wouldn't own this CD. I just realized, I think I misspoke previously. When I was talking about the New Kids on the Block Hanging Tough CD, I meant to say there's no reason why I would own this CD. I meant to say would, not wouldn't, kind of a double negative there. Okay, so that speaks to the music. I also tested a number of video games, Star Trek Bridge Crew, Elite Dangerous. The Lab is put out by, it's bundled with the HTC Vive. Space Pirate Trainer, I tested that on the Windows Mixed Reality setup, and Dear Esther. So I got a good round of games to test with. Now, for the Oculus Rift head-mounted display, so I'm talking about the CV1, that computer is based on an Intel Core i7 6700K CPU, a Gigabyte Z170 XP SLI motherboard, and an NVIDIA GTX 1070 graphics card. And as described earlier, I tested music CDs, games, and I tested both having the audio go through the Oculus Rift to their own headphones and connecting these headphones to the motherboard itself. So I need to come forward that there are some challenges with the Oculus Rift that I didn't have with the other solutions. In the case of Oculus, if you're going to listen to audio directly through their head-mounted display, you have to use their headphones. Okay, you could take the headphones off and listen to your own headphones, but in a scenario like that, the headphones connect to your computer, not connected through the head-mounted display itself, like you would with Windows Mixed Reality or an HTC Vive. So when it came to making a comparison, this wasn't a case where I'm comparing the same results of these headphones on the Rift, with their own. Like what I'm trying to say is that I wasn't able to use the exact same headphones on the Oculus Rift as I was with the other solutions. But that being said, when I listened to the audio through the Oculus Rift, I found it was so-so for music. Video games sounded a lot better, but music was so-so. But when it came to, connecting through the motherboard and listening to audio through the motherboard through the Oculus Rift, it sounded better. The music sounded better, but it wasn't really a huge difference. In my opinion, I think the difference didn't really have anything to do with how the audio was processed. I think the difference is that the headphones themselves were better than what I was getting with a raw Oculus Rift. Now, but I did make a very interesting discovery. When I was playing back audio in that particular setup, so that's a Gigabyte Z170 XP SLI motherboard. When I was listening to CD audio, so music through audio CDs, the CPU showed a 20 to 30% loss in performance. 20 to 30% was going to the audio processing. If I wasn't listening to CD audio, and I was using other audio sources like straight digital files, like WAV files or MP3 files, the performance loss was about 10 to 15%, which I was kind of expecting. That didn't surprise me, but I was surprised that music CDs were eating so much processing power compared to the other options. It didn't make a difference, though, if I was listening directly through the Oculus Rift or if I was listening through headphones plugged into the motherboard. It made no difference as far as CPU performance is concerned. So in this scenario, I think that the NVIDIA graphics card, even though the audio signals were going through the card, through the HDMI connector to the head-mounted display, it was really a pass-through behavior. I didn't see any additional processing happening there. Now, the HTC Vive system, okay, so this is the HTC Vive right here. The PC was identical, okay, so Intel Core i7 6700K, Gigabyte Z170 XP SLI motherboard, AMD, except the difference is it had an AMD R9 390X graphics card, okay? I tested music, I tested games, I tested audio both running through the HDMI and going out through the through the HMD to my headphones, and also connecting directly to the motherboard, as I had with the other system, which was running the Oculus Rift. The audio was pretty much identical. I couldn't tell a difference between the two output options. But the other thing that I found, which I thought was really interesting, was whether it was connected directly to the motherboard or connected through the HDMI connector through the HMD, there was no impact on the CPU. The performance of the CPU did not change when I was playing back any kind of audio. So based on what I've read, that the AMD graphics cards do audio processing. So I think what's been happening is that the AMD graphics card is taking care of a lot of the audio processing responsibilities on behalf of the CPU. So this is an example of those processing responsibilities being offset from the CPU. I thought that was very interesting. Now, for the Acer Windows Mixed Reality, what I did was, actually it's not so much about the Acer Windows Mixed Reality, it's about the third option, okay? So the second option, I should say, is the other motherboard I was testing was the G752VS laptop. And this is again, based on an Intel Core i7 CPU mobile version and a mobile version of an NVIDIA GTX 1070. I ran very much the same tests: music, games, audio through HDMI. So again, I connected the output from the computer through HDMI, listened to audio through the headphones. And some interesting finds. So first off, I was surprised. The audio did not impact the CPU at all. Like there was, I was looking at Task Manager and Windows, and there was no indication that the audio was significantly impacting at all. But the thing is, the audio quality was the absolute worst. Like it wasn't, how should I put it? It wasn't terrible to listen to, but relative to my other motherboards, there was definitely a difference. Like it was the worst performing of the group. I suspect that what they traded off with CPU processing power, they lost in the audio quality. And I found that, I would play with the equalizers and do everything I can, and I just couldn't get the full audio experience that I was getting from the other solutions. So then we get to the Sound Blaster, finally, thank you for your patience, the Creative Lab Sound Blaster AE5 sound card. So I'm just going to share with you the specifications of the card. Okay, so this is what Creative Labs markets. So first off, it's based on a Sabre 32-bit audio processor digital analog converter. Okay, so this is I looked it up, and Sabre is considered very much a high-end DAC chip. It performs at its peak performance. Okay, if you were going to use the full processor to its full capacity, you'd be looking at a 32-bit depth with 384 kilohertz sample rate. Okay, so that's well beyond the abilities of the human ear. Okay, that's the absolute peak. In practice, you're more likely going to max out at a 32-bit depth with 96 kilohertz, which is still well above the abilities of the human ear. Now, as far as dynamic range, I think I touched on this earlier. Most motherboards, according to Creative Labs, market themselves at a 90 decibel dynamic range. The Gigabyte Z170 XP SLI motherboard, it performs at 115 decibels dynamic range. The Sound Blaster AE5 is marketed at 122 decibels of dynamic range. So it's a significant improvement on paper. It also includes 3.5 millimeter jacks to connect microphone, to connect headphone. Of course, it's got all the inputs for a 5.1 surround sound system, not 7.1, but 5.1 physical surround sound speakers. It's got a Toslink TOS LINK, so it's a Toslink connector. It's a digital connector. but it's not really applicable for surround sound. I think there might be a hack to make it work, but you're really not going to get the same surround sound performance that you would have gotten from an HDMI or DisplayPort connector. So it's not really I don't think it's a very important feature for our needs. And finally, it's got an what they call an XAMP headphones amp. This is about boosting that signal to make sure that the audio will sound its best on high quality headphones. So what am I listening for? Okay, so I've got this highfalutin sound card. What would make a difference for me? So first up, I'm looking for audio resolution. Does the audio sound muddled? Can I hear the vibrations with clarity? The textures of the audio. Like if I'm listening to music and there's like a really good guitar riff, will I hear the distinct vibrations of the guitar? Can I make out the instruments? I mean, when a band is playing, could I clearly make out, what's playing and whereabouts in the audio field? Are the channel divisions clear? These are the kinds of things that I'm looking for. This is really important. Audio fullness, okay? Is the audio thin or tinny? Is it overwhelmed with bass? So what I often find is that, if it's not a really strong audio performer, the bass is purposely pumped up so that you're not concentrating on those higher frequencies. Does the audio sound clearly divided between the different frequency ranges? Like you really want to be able to pick out the details of the audio and the textures of the audio. Positional audio, obviously, this is very important when it comes to virtual reality. Can you, especially if you're going through headphones instead of physical surround sound speakers, can you make out where things are coming from? Are transitions smooth or choppy? And what I mean by that is, does it sound like you hear clicks as you go in different parts of the sound stage, or is it smooth? Like, can you circle things around your head and you hear from different angles, accurately from different angles? Are there gaps? Is there bad stitching? I mean, these are the kinds of things that I was looking for when testing with virtual reality content. So the first question is, and this has to do with the marketing hoopla, is Sound Blaster bit depth versus the virtual reality bit depth. Okay, and this is what I found. So when you go through your Windows settings, so if you're going to listen to content, let's say on the Oculus Rift or the HTC Vive, you can adjust the audio. And what I found is that the bit depth was maxed out at 16-bit audio depth. And I was surprised, because I'm thinking, gee, that sounds kind of low, because the Sound Blaster is marketing itself at 32 bits. So like that's double, right? I mean, surely it would sound better for that reason. So the big question I had was, is the bit depth, and remember, this is about how much information is handled at a time, just like your CPU, 16-bit, 32-bit, 64-bit, and so on. Will I hear a difference? If I'm getting content at a higher bit depth, will it make a difference in the audio experience? And the result was no. I tried comparing 16-bit audio to 24-bit audio to 32-bit audio, and I tested on each system. I tested on the motherboard. I tested through the Creative Lab sound card, even on their own solution. And climbing from 8 to 16 was an obvious difference. Climbing 16 to 24 was debatable at best. I really didn't hear a difference. Going to 32-bit made no difference whatsoever. And I'm not even sure about the 16 to 24. I really did not hear a significant difference at all. Maybe I was imagining things. It was that minor a difference. So in my opinion, the high bit depth, it has little to do with playback. That's more to do with recording audio content and being able to make fine adjustments with your audio that are harder to do at lower bit depth. So it's from it sounds great for marketing, but for practical purposes, you really don't need more than 16-bit depth when it comes to audio. So what I would recommend, if you do get a Sound Blaster AE5, when it comes to your audio settings, stick with, just for completeness, go with 24-bit depth with 48 kilohertz. for your sample rate. My understanding is most content is recorded in this format. You may not hear a difference from the 16 to 24, but it's there for completeness, just in case, and that's how the content's recorded. So why not, right? So as far as the Sound Blaster AE5, what did I ultimately find? So what were the results of what I heard? So when it came to audio resolution, definite improvement. It was easier to distinguish the audio elements. I found the audio was significantly sharper. It had more texture. When I played the games and I listened to music, for me, I found that the difference was obvious. And I think others, if they were to listen to let's say a traditional motherboard and what they get through a Sound Blaster AE5, I think that the difference would be obvious for them as well. The fullness, the audio fullness, this is where the Sound Blaster really shines. The audio sounded rich. I think that's the best way to put it. It just sounded rich, and it's a richness that otherwise wouldn't be there. Just to give you a heads up, when you start using it by default, it seems to have a lot of bass. And remember I told you that if you have too much, sometimes they hide the audio by having more bass than needed. You could easily scale that back and still maintain that audio quality. I'm really happy with the audio I was getting out of it. Positional audio, it works just fine. I did some tests and hear how accurate things were, and it was fine. I really have no complaints. In fact, what you can do is there's a setting. Now, again, this isn't about having physical speakers. This is about simulated speakers through your headphones. And what you can do is you could adjust the soundstage. So you could kind of adjust the distance these virtual speakers are from your head, okay? I think the default settings are just fine. I haven't really had a need to change them, but the setting is there if you need it. Now, this is a little bit controversial. The Sound Blaster AE5, they have a crystallizer feature. This is a software feature. So what often happens with audio when it's recorded is it's compressed. And when I'm talking about compressed, I'm not talking about making a big file smaller. I'm talking about literally adjusting the dynamic range, and sometimes they want to make an announcer sound punched up and make his voice sound beefier than it is, or so they manipulate the audio. And this is one form of compression. What the crystallizer does is sometimes people don't want that functionality. People don't want that feature, and they think that it would sound better without that compression. So what the crystallizer does is it makes estimates, and it tries to undo this. And there's heavy debate from what I read online, among the audiophiles as to whether or not this should be done, and how much of an improvement does it make in the audio experience. I tested with and without the crystallizer. Personally, I like it. I mean, I find that the audio sounds better with that functionality on, but you could turn it off and you could adjust how much of that crystallizer you want to use. I was curious to see if something similar was available for motherboards or other audio devices if they don't have a sound card. Maybe the CPU could do the same thing, but I haven't been able to find any. If you find one, let me know. But all in all, I personally like the feature, but I know there's healthy debate around it. Now, this is perhaps the most important question: is how much of an improvement will you experience? So let's say you have an existing motherboard solution on your PC. You seem to be enjoying it. Do you really need a sound card? How much of an improvement will you experience? Well, I'd say there's two possibilities. Possibility number one is it's going to be a dramatic improvement. I mean, a really good example for me is my own gaming laptop computer, the Asus G752VS. All in all, it's a great machine, but the audio had the lowest fidelity. Completely playable. I mean, you're still enjoying your games and so on, but you really are missing something. And comparing the two, that motherboard has very, very thin audio compared to what I would be getting through a Sound Blaster AE5. It's just a very dramatic difference. The other thing too is, anyway, I'll go into it a little bit later about the equalizer, but anyway, it doesn't matter. The other possibility is, if it's not dramatic, it will be significant. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, the other two machines were based on the Gigabyte Z170 XP SLI motherboards. I think they were very good to begin with. I mean, I play all the content and games on them, been very happy with them. But even so, the Sound Blaster had a significantly richer experience than what I would be getting on those motherboards alone. So how to know? Okay, so let's say you're interested in buying a sound card and you're not sure if you should get one. Is it worth your while? Is there any way you could find out ahead of time? And I'm afraid there really is no way to predict this, because you don't really know what the motherboards are manufacturing. The content is coded for all, so there's no secret handshakes with the content makers that's making content sound better on one motherboard versus another. I personally think it's very interesting that there's such a variation in the first place. I was very surprised that there was a dramatic difference between the laptop motherboard and then my desktop motherboard. So how can you go about making a decision like this? Let me just highlight some things to be aware of as a VR gamer, because that's part of the decision process as well. First, when you're using a Sound Blaster card, you can't run it through the HDMI connector. You have to plug your headphones directly into the sound card itself. So this is why, see, there's a method to my madness. So I have this wire here. I have to use, this is a 50-foot wire extension. I plug it into the PC, and I just have it lead up all the way to my head-mounted display, and I walk around with this head-mounted display with this wire plus this wire. I mean, that's the reality of it. The other option, I was thinking, well, I wonder if I could use Bluetooth. Maybe because they sell these products where you could have a Bluetooth transmitter. You plug it into the headphones jack on your sound card or your motherboard. It transmits the audio signal as ones and zeros, and you have the receiver. Your receiver would be on your headphones. And I thought, hey, maybe that's a good idea. But the problem with Bluetooth is that just the nature of Bluetooth alone diminishes the audio quality. So forget the conversions of going, from analog to digital, then back to analog again. As I described earlier, the nature of Bluetooth is going to diminish the audio. If you compare Bluetooth headphones versus hearing through a wired connection, you'll hear a significant difference, and that's because of the Bluetooth compression. Maybe that will change. Okay, maybe that's that will change one day, but right now, that's something to think about. So in my opinion, if you're a virtual reality gamer and you take the audio very seriously, your best bet, really your only bet, is to have an extension cable so that you can have that room scale experience and fully enjoy the audio that the Creative Labs delivers. Now, a little bit of good news is that Creative Labs told me, this is a while ago, but they told me that it is on their roadmap to find a way to have the audio transmitted through the HDMI connection so that you could enjoy the audio properly through your head-mounted displays. It's on the roadmap, but they couldn't comment further beyond that, so we'll see. So other applicable features, okay, this is the pure edition of the AE5, okay? It comes with strips of LED lights, all right? And what you do with the LED lights is you make your computer a big dance party. That's what it is. Now, the default AE5 comes with one strip of LED lights with the controller, of course, built into the sound card. The pure version comes with 4 strips, so party, 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 but that's what it's for. If that's valuable to you, then it's worth having. It's a nice to have. Now, the other functionality, this isn't applicable to a VR gamer, is Scout 2.0, and the idea is that as you're playing your video game, it analyzes the audio, how the audio is coded, and it could tell you where other players are in the game based on analyzing how the audio is. So that's kind of a cheat, so people can't sneak up on you in your favorite video games. Again, it's not something that's going to be applicable to a VR gamer because there's no way for them to see this, at least not yet. Should a VR gamer buy this? So this is the big question, right? So these are the reasons to buy the Sound Blaster AE5. If you want to be sure you're getting the best audio possible, okay, no matter what motherboard you have, if you just want to be absolutely sure, then get the card. If you're an audiophile, and if you're an audiophile, it means you got great equipment and you really, really care what the audio sounds like, get the card. If you have, let's face it, I mean, if you have a really good set of headphones, these are good, but there are really good headphones in the hundreds of dollars out there, and you need something to properly drive that, get the card. Here's a quick test for you to do if you're listening to audio and you're playing with the equalizers and it's just, you're not getting the audio that you expect to be getting, or you just can't get it to sound rich enough and you're just unhappy with it, get the card. Now, as a VR gamer, these are reasons to avoid the AE5, okay? If you these are all wired solutions, but we have, we're starting to see wireless options in the PC space. If you absolutely need wireless functionality, wait until the HDMI throughput is possible from Creative Labs. Now, I don't know if that's going to actually work through wireless solutions, but that's really our best bet. But the other thing to think about is, if and when true wireless audio is available. Okay, so let's say Creative Labs works something out with their Sound Blaster that it is indeed possible for them to transfer their audio results wirelessly to a head-mounted display. The nature of wireless is likely going to diminish the quality. Okay, so similar to what we've been experiencing with Bluetooth, we may have a very similar result with wireless and virtual reality. So that may defeat the whole purpose altogether. So it's something to think about. So on that note, I mean, having compared this to existing motherboards and listening to what's available through virtual reality devices, I would rate the Sound Blaster AE5 sound card an 8 on 10. I think it's a quality product. The audio benefits were immediately clear to me, and I have multiple audio solutions to test against. And I think that if you're very serious about your audio and you want to make sure that you get that complete audio experience, this comes recommended. So we'll be back with more right after this. Thank you for visiting me in my messy basement. If you want to be a guest on the program, by all means, send me an email at neilsmessybasement@mtbs3d.com. That's neilsmessybasement@mtbs3d.com. I plan to do another one of these soon, so we'll talk soon. Thanks for watching.